and we'd like to invite Momentus to the stage.
Good morning. I'm Nagar Faher. I'm the VP of Product and Business Development at Momentus, and I'm here to talk to you about our in-space transportation services. The vision of Momentus is a future where humanity is equipped to move freely throughout the solar system. And in order to do that, one of the problems you need to address is space transportation. Today, space is being democratized. Why? Because we have reusable rockets, reducing the cost of access to space and enabling more and more ride shares of smaller satellites to space. But the problem for all of those satellites is those satellites that get rideshare missions are secondaries. They're not the primary on the mission, so a lot of times they don't get dropped off exactly where they want to be. So that's why we came up with the idea of connecting flights in space at Momentus. Just like a connecting flight here on the ground is always cheaper than a direct flight, we're taking that exact same business model there and offering connecting flights in space. The way that a connecting flight in space would work is that we would take your satellite, we would put it on top of our shuttle, and put that whole assembly on top of a rocket. Once the rocket reaches space, we separate from the rocket and we take your satellite, or satellites, could be multiple, and drop them off at their specific desired orbit. It could be various altitudes, inclinations, etc. And we dispense them. And at that point, we deorbit our vehicle and bring it back down to Earth. Initially, these vehicles that we're building are disposable, but eventually they will be reusable when infrastructure exists in space to refuel them and to use them again and again. Our proprietary and patented technology is called water plasma propulsion. We have developed this to run on a propellant, such as water, because it's safe and it's very affordable, because we need our transportation systems to be as cheap as possible. And it also provides a higher thrust and efficiency than the typical systems. And I'll go into more of that in a minute. The way that this water plasma propulsion works, which could also be referred to in industry as microwave electrothermal propulsion, is you have a resonant chamber, you inject water vapor into this resonant chamber, and then you emit microwave energy onto that water vapor, converting the water vapor into a highly energized plasma that then we put through a converging diverging nozzle to generate thrust. And what you end up is a system that's much more efficient than your typical chemical rocket and much faster than the electric propulsion systems that are used today. We've already built this. What you see right here is our propulsion tank, our feed system for feeding the water into our thruster that's shown there. And we flew it last week. On July 4th, we launched our system on a 16U CubeSat. And the purpose of this mission is to demonstrate the performance on orbit. So we will be firing these thrusters numerous times and collecting data to compare it to the data that we've tested here on Earth to assure the performance. Because when we tell a customer it's going to take you, for example, 3 months to go from GTO to GEO, we want to have 100% confidence that these numbers are real. And that's why we did this demo launch last week. I did mention that we're more efficient than chemical rockets. I just wanted to put this figure up here as an example of what that exactly means. If you, for example, were to launch a 1,000 kilogram satellite from LEO to GEO, it would take you about 4,000 kilograms on a traditional rocket using kerosene or LOX, or 11,000 kilograms using hydrazine. These are both chemical propulsion systems. If you were to use our system, we would only need 1,300 kilograms of water. So you're saving, a quarter of the mass of propellant you would need to do this transfer, which then also saves you on launch costs and numerous other things. Right now, the trend, if you look at it from back in the space shuttle days, was $60,000 a kilogram to launch a satellite. Today, thanks to all the technologies that companies such as SpaceX has developed, that's dropped down to $1,000 a kilogram. And in the next coming years, it's going to continue to drop as rockets grow larger and larger to have the capacities to take us to places like the Moon and Mars, reducing the overall cost of access to space down to $500 a kilogram. These trends are all great for us because as rockets get larger and larger, there will be more and more rideshares because there's not going to be one satellite that can fit the entire mass capacity that, let's say, a Starship would have. If you're looking at a satellite that weighs 50 tons or 100 tons, they're not being made today. I mean, in the future, there might be more. And that means that more and more satellites will ride share together, ending up in a specific locations they might not want, necessitating the need for more connecting flights that we provide. We make transportation cheaper by numerous ways. Here's an example of a constellation. If you wanted to launch a constellation to provide coverage around the entire Earth of small sats, let's say 96 of them, and you wanted them to give full coverage, you need to have them in various planes around the Earth. And in this example, we're showing it with 12 planes. Today, in order to achieve that, you have to launch 12 different rockets to achieve those various planes, which would cost you, even with the cheapest rockets available on the market today, $72 million. With our system, you could put all of these satellites on the same rocket and then use our orbital shuttles to transport each one of these satellites to their desired orbit. And each shuttle can address multiple planes. So you can see the price is like half. The market size for space transportation in general is about $5 billion today. And with the new business cases being opened up and the constellations coming in and all this new space industry, the projection is that it's going to double by 2030. Along with that, the rideshare market is growing. As you can see, as I've projected, it's in purple. And with that growing, our market will be growing because we service that market as well. We complement the rideshare market. So we're projecting by 2030 our share of the market for in-space rides to be about $3 billion. And of that, if we take 30% assumption, our market is actually $1 billion. And if you think about our market, just like 10 years ago, the transportation market here on Earth was huge, right? But there was no rideshare service, and there was no market for it. Lyft, Uber didn't exist. That's exactly where we are today. Our in-space flights don't exist today. But guess what? In 10 years, it's going to be huge, just like Lyft and Uber have dominated. So this has been noticed by our investors. We have $16 million raised in terms of seed funding. We're closing our Series A right now, so we're not here asking for funding. We're here actually asking for partnerships with NASA and other customers. We've signed $29 million in contracts, and we have 9 patents currently pending. We have numerous integration partners, including people like NanoRacks, who help us launch off of the International Space Station, ExoLaunch, which helped us with the launch that we did last week off of Soyuz, and Precious Payload. The first service we've introduced to market is called Vigoride. Vigoride is a platform that can launch up to 250 kilograms to a low Earth orbit, and it's designed with a delta V of about 1 kilometer per second in order to accommodate transfers within the low Earth orbit realm. If you have a constellation of small satellites or one big small satellite, this service would be perfect for that. And we offer line services where we book the launch and provide our service on top, and then provide that as ride shares to our customers who could be riding multiple different customers on the same Vigoride. Vigoride Extended is the next service we've offered to the market. This one can take up to 300 kilograms to a geosynchronous orbit and, to the moon. And then, imagine we're on the moon, we mine water off the moon, then we use that to go all the way to Mars and beyond. The delta V on this system is about 5 kilometers per second, and it's currently priced at $4.8 million. Arteride is a service we're going to introduce in 2022. This one can carry up to 4 tons, and it's designed so that it's very modular. It has different ESPA ports around where you can mount your satellite onto the port, or you can put a very big satellite all the way on the top. And this one is priced about $9.8 million. This service is very perfect in the future for launching big infrastructure needed in order to enable more human space exploration. This shows you our service roadmap. I talked about Vigoride and Vigoride Extended, which are small sat platforms designed for the next year or two. Then we move on to Arteride in 2022 that can take up to 4 tons. And in 2023, we'll be offering Fervoride. Fervoride will be able to transfer up to 10 tons within orbit. So the launch schedule we have currently included the launch we had last week, which was our demo launch. We have 3 missions manifested for 2020 of Vigoride. We're going to be flying it on a Soyuz in the 2nd to 3rd quarter. Then we're going to fly it off of the International Space Station. And note that we're so safe because we use water as our propellant, and it's not a pressurized system, that we can fly off of manned platforms such as the International Space Station and Deep Space Gateway and other manned platforms in the future. And then the last flight we have planned for next year is going off of a Falcon 9. We also have plans for launching Vigoride Extended in 2021. So if anyone's interested in flying with us, we have availability. Come see me afterwards. Happy to tell you more about each one of these missions and where we could take you. We were awarded a NASA award through NIAC Phase 3 for doing asteroid mining demo, actually. What you see there is Astrobee, which is a platform designed to demonstrate how we are going to be able to excavate and extract water from asteroids in the future using our platform. So we're collaborating with TransAstra and numerous other companies on this mission for NASA. And we're looking at other applications that NASA might want for our technologies. We really want to ensure a sustainable future in space. And one way you can do that is by using in situ resources you can mine in space. And that was another reason we chose water as our propellant, because you can reduce the amount of things that you have to send up to space. We can reuse and recycle our platform by refueling in space using resources available there. And our mission ultimately is to provide the most efficient and affordable in-space services supplied by in situ resources. And the team that's going to make this mission possible is called Momentus. Our founders include Mikhail Kokorich, who co-founded 2 other billion-dollar space companies. You might have heard of Astrodigital and Helios Wire. He also founded numerous businesses and exited very successfully in the past. Lev Kassis is his co-founder and chairman for Momentus. He used to be the senior vice president of Walmart and has an extensive commercial background in addition to a PhD in physics. Dr. Joel Sercel is our CTO. He used to be a principal engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, studied electric propulsion systems, and has an extensive background in there. He also co-founded TransAstra, which is an asteroid mining company. We're lucky to have 2 of our advisors be the inventors of the technology, the microwave electrothermal technology at Penn State. Their names are Mike Michi and Sven Blenn. And one of their students, actually, Philip Mainwaring, is our VP of propulsion, who studied under them and then later joined the aerospace market and now works for us. In general, we have a very diverse team. We have former SSL staff members, JPL, SpaceX, SSTL, Busick, Raytheon, et cetera. And they're not all depicted here. Our team is actually over 20 people, and it's growing, so we're hiring. So if you know anyone looking, please talk to me afterwards. And now I'm going to show just a quick video of what an orbit transfer using Momentus would look like. So there you see the rocket fairing separated, our vehicle separating from the rocket, solar panels deploying. Those are the thrusters. And then at that point, we transfer the satellite to its desired orbit. And we separate. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
So I'm still a little confused. I know you have proprietary water propellant technology. I also know that you're doing ride sharing. Are the two at all related, or you simply have a passion for pooling resources in addition to being able to build a new kind of propulsion? Or do I have any of that misunderstood?
They're related.
They're related.
The water plasma propulsion technology that we've developed is actually part of the engine that powers our shuttles, our space shuttles, to take satellites from one point to another. The rideshare service is a service that we can provide to our customers, enabling them to go from one point to another. So we can either take one satellite from A to B, or multiple. Imagine like Uber and Uber Pool. You can either get an Uber all for yourself, or you could share it with others. The same thing, we can ride one satellite or multiple satellites.
And is there anything about it being water plasma powered that makes you better at doing ride share?
Yes, it's a much safer system, because it's not as pressurized. It has a very benign propellant, makes it much easier for us to provide that service. And it allows us to fly off of more platforms, such as manned platforms that exists in space. Because if we flew a toxic propellant that was pressurized and really likely to explode, they wouldn't allow us to do that. So that's one of the differentiators.
Thank you.
No problem.
Then, related to that, are you taking any IP or trademark strategy to help, or regulation to help create a moat around the fact that you're getting to ride sharing and trying to make that a core part of your business?
No, we are not, writing IP around providing rideshares. Today, there are a lot of companies actually providing rideshare services. They just don't have our technology to transfer people from where they get dropped off. So if you book a rideshare today, they would drop you off where the rocket drops you off. And that's it. You're just riding along with 20, 30, 50 other people. Like we did last week. When we launched, we were on a rideshare mission. The primary was a Meteor satellite. We were a secondary. So as a secondary, we get dropped off where the primary mission gets dropped off. But the advantage that we have is once we get dropped off from there, we have a propulsion system on board that can propel us somewhere else. We don't have to stay there.
Thank you.
So I did a lot of research on rideshare over the last few years. I'm presuming that you'd be tagged or connected to like a ESPA class kind of band or an Aquila kind of connector
Yes.
underneath the primary. I guess the question I have is what's the ISP of this engine and how's it's throttleable in terms of its thrust? What's its throttleability?
Right. So to answer the first part of your question, yes, our platforms are compatible with the ESPA standard and the ESPA Grande standard and other rideshare platforms that were developed by the Air Force and other entities. So thank you to the Air Force and NASA for developing those things. In terms of the performance, our ISP and thrust, those are proprietary numbers that I don't want to broadcast live, but during the impact tables, I'm happy to share with you our ISP and thrust figures for the various platforms that we have. It varies from Vigoride to Vigoride Extended to Ardride and others, but I'm sure you'll be pleased once I share that data with you.
Can
Thank you.
you tell us what the power levels that you need are to operate? The power levels?
Yes. Again, it's with our smaller platforms, it's under a kilowatt, a couple hundred watts. Close to, I would say, 200-300 watts. And with our larger platforms like Vigoride Extended, Ardride, it's in the kilowatt level. And during the impact tables, I can tell you the precise power levels for each platform. Yes.
You may not be able to share your customers, but maybe customer profile or customer type where you're unlocking a new capability, a new market, and then that's going to accelerate, because the large graph is great, but maybe help us to understand whether it's satellite communications or science mission. What are the types that you're giving them a new capability that they've been dying for?
So we have serviced different verticals of customers. The first vertical you can envision are satellite operators. So satellite operators could be operators operating constellation of satellites. You've heard of the constellations such as OneWeb, et cetera. Constellations of small satellites like Planet, Spire, et cetera. Or communication satellites for IoT applications. So a lot of those constellation providers actually need their satellites of specific orbits in order to get the coverage that they need. So they are very excited to be talking to us. I was just talking to a customer yesterday that was ecstatic that he could launch and put each of his satellites exactly where he wanted to be, because that means that they can get a return on their investment faster. The next, did you want to follow up?
Yeah. Do their satellites, are you saving them a lot of money by not having to build satellites that are self-propulsion, that you're providing propulsion for them?
Yes. So basically, they don't need to fly a propulsion module on every single one of their satellites. So it not only saves them money, but also volume. Because a lot of times for launches to low Earth orbit, they're volume limited more so than mass limited. So basically, they can fly more payload and larger payloads and just use us as a service to get them to where they need to be.
Are you giving any of your customers exclusivity, short-term exclusivity?
No.
Okay.
No, none of our integration partners are exclusive, and none of our customers have exclusivity. But we are giving them, preferential pricing and the opportunity to get to where they need to be. And our verticals I was mentioning earlier, we have the satellite operators, and you also have the aggregators. So people like spaceflight, exo launch, and others that basically take a lot of satellites and aggregate them all onto the same rocket need our services, because that would enable them to fly more and more satellites on that one particular rocket that they've manifested. So they're another big category of customers, and numerous others in the government, et cetera. Like I mentioned one from NASA, but there's others.
So I have a question over here to your right.
Yeah.
So lots of variations of RF thermal propulsion systems have been around for many years. And there's several companies even developing water-based systems currently. So can you comment what really differentiates your propulsion system from the others available, or again, the IP that's already been established?
Yes. So yes, there are numerous other water propulsion systems that run off of water, but none of them have the high ISB and thrust levels that we do. And we chose this solution because it offered us the shortest trip times. We didn't want it to take somebody a year to get from point A to point B. We have in our models that the longest trip time that we would want to take is like 3 months, for example. And another differentiator on our technology is that it's an electrodeless system, so it's not limited in terms of the lifetime by the electrodes degrading over time. So that also sets us apart from the other modules that have been developed. But the main thing is the fact that we have a much higher thrust, about 10 times higher than they do, which is what we really need in order to offer our services.
And a follow-up, have you ever looked at where the crossover is, where it doesn't make sense to use water anymore? Specifically, I noticed you're scaling up your larger systems.
Yeah.
And when you're deploying systems that are many thousands of kilograms, typically we don't have any constraints anymore where you can't fly pressurized systems. And if you have many kilowatts and you're not constraining your propellants,
Right.
A more incumbent technology would usually play out better.
We are looking and trading for future platforms, what makes the most sense. But the whole vision and around the fact that we're using water is that we envision being able to mine it in space and use it to go deeper and deeper into space. So that was the whole premise of why we're using this system and this propellant. But that doesn't mean that for ride, I mean, if at that point people are comfortable flying a nuclear propulsion system, maybe we'll look at that. But it's not really something that we see as feasible today, and that's why it's not, in the trade space. But that doesn't mean in the future we wouldn't fly other propulsion systems. We could, definitely. It's just, this is one of our differentiators today, and it's what's been enabling us to do what we're doing at the price points we can do.
I have one for you on your left. Could you talk a little bit more about your competitors in the space and how you stack up against them?
Yeah, so our competitors you can think of as, I'm sorry, their name just escaped me. D-Orbit, for example, is another platform that's trying to offer space tugs, except they've been in business for over 5 years, and they just launched they're going to be launching their first satellite this year. And they can only service CubeSats because they're not using, water plasma propulsion, so they're much slower, and they're tailored towards a different market, and they're more distracted because they're offering multiple services. We're squarely focused on space transportation, particularly in-space transportation. Other competitors who are not really direct competitors, but could be considered competitors, are propulsion system providers. The people buy each one of their propulsion systems and fly them on board their satellites. And then the last one you can imagine is dedicated launches. People who build, rocket labs, Firefly, et cetera, would be other competitors. Firefly is also building an orbit transfer vehicle. But again, I think that our differentiator against a lot of them is, for example, with Fireflies, is the focus we have in our market, whereas Firefly is also building a rocket and other things. So, but I hope they're successful too. And the fact that we have competitors also tells you that there's a market there. Atomos Nuclear is another company that's developing space tugs, but theirs are electric nuclear powered. So it's going to be a while before they fly. I think their first flight is in 2021. So by then, we'll have flown like 5 missions by the time they start flying. So I hope that answers your question.
Classic VC question, what's your end game? Are you hoping to be acquired? Are you hoping to remain a large private company? How does Momentus define success for itself?
So I think all of the above are options. Merger and acquisition is a typical exit strategy in space. You can see that, for example, Millennium Space was acquired by Boeing. And there's a few other examples of that. So I think that could be a potential exit strategy, but more so I think we'd prefer to remain private until we reach our goals of building our larger and larger platforms. And at that point, then we'll look at a potential exit and IPO, which is our preferred end game, but a lot of times in aerospace, the larger corporations will acquire you, which is not bad either. But we're hoping to build up our patent portfolio and our proficiencies to the point where we'll have an early exit. And we've been lucky enough to be, one of the YC batch in summer of 2018. We were on their Series A program, in their seed program, and we just completed their Series A program. So that's why I said we're in the process of closing our note for our Series A. But that's what we see at this point.
Thank you.
No problem.
Do you, on the rideshare aspect of your business model, what I found when I was looking at this very closely after the last few years was that there was not as much capacity in the US launch market as there was overseas. There was some that were coming along, but ULA, they were trying to get that done, but basically it's all government launches, in which case you have a whole different set of issues to go through if you're doing rideshare on a government launch. SpaceX was kind of, okay, maybe we will, maybe we won't. They change their minds fairly often, and they have a huge manifest of their own stuff to put up. You're going to be waiting for Blue. Okay, you may have one or two of the other guys. So what I'm saying is most of your launch potential going to be overseas, ISRO or European, or are you waiting for it to develop in this country?
Both. So we will be using international launch partners for sure, but we're also, 2 out of the 3 launches we have booked for next year are US. So the ISS launch will probably go up on a SpaceX Dragon resupply mission. And the Falcon mission next year is the US launch that we're ride sharing on. And they actually do ride shares all the time. We can do ride share with them to GTO because a lot of times when they fly their primary mission, they have excess mass capacity. So we're talking to them about a couple of rides to GTOs that we can then take our customers to GEO with. In terms of the international rideshare capacity, yes. The Indians have a lot right now on PSLV and SSLV in the future, so we're looking forward to that. And there are, there's over 100 companies that are pitching new launch vehicles right now. Relativity is another US company that we're looking at because we see a potential with their 3D printed rocket as being very affordable and something that can get us to a highly elliptical orbit that then we can use to transfer to other orbits. So we see a lot of potential here in the US in terms of launch options, but also that doesn't mean we won't use international ones. We're using both at this point. And, for example, with Soyuz and Russian launches, they have a Fragart upper stage that they use for doing a lot of their kick stages and stuff like that. But even with that, we're still complementary because they can't do small maneuvers. They can't do like a small, 50-kilometer, 100-kilometer altitude change or a minor inclination change. So we complement them as well. So that's why we have a lot of different launch partners and people that we work with.
Is your company planning to take the regulatory moat strategy where you encourage or lobby for regulation that blocks more volatile propulsion systems from being used in certain markets as your technology grows?
No, that is not our plan right now. We are part of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, which is a lobbying group in Washington, D.C. So we work closely with them. And we see our system is complementary to a lot of those other systems because a lot of the satellites we fly will still need to fly propulsion system for station keeping. So we'll get them from point A to point B, but in order for them to stay at that point B, they need to fly another propulsion system on board that's called a station keeping propulsion system so that their satellite doesn't come back down due to the Earth's gravitational field or other things. So we still want other propulsion technologies to exist. But we do have ones that run off of water that you could use, just we don't sell propulsion systems. It's not our business model.
So along the same line, how are you looking to focus on new product lines, either in-space propulsion and the various lines for the various categories we have, and launch systems? So very different types of propulsion subsystems.
So if I understand your question correctly, you're asking what products we're going to focus on in the future?
Right now,
in
you
terms
have
of
a
developing?
vision for something that's very bold and very big
Yes.
for the shuttle. That's big. That's huge. But I see a number of product lines that could spin off of this for the various categories, whether it's not just launch propulsion, but also in-space propulsion.
Yes.
What are you looking to do to diversify that and actually be active players in that using this technology for water-based propulsion?
So
Can we go ahead and table that for the
Okay.
questions at the impact tables, Peter? Because we are out of time and we want to stay on schedule.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to talking to you about that at the impact table.